Reality Transurfing, Book 4, Ruling Reality, by Vadim Zeland. Chapter 1, Dancing with the Shadows. Segment, The Rule of the Pendulum. The Rule of the Pendulum. In our world, almost everywhere we go, we come across direct or indirect information to do with sexual relations. Within the within the transurfing model, this topic, like many others, is presented from an unusual perspective. Sex plays a rather significant part in people's private lives, whether they want to admit it or not. Actually, not sex itself, but people's attitude to it. It doesn't matter whether a person leads an active sex life or not. Occasionally, there are flashes in their thoughts which express their attitude to sex. Generally speaking, there cannot be a neutral stance in this case. Human nature will make itself known one way or another. Some people's attitude becomes apparent in their aversion, annoyance, mockery, or rejection. The attitude of others turns into intention. And if their intention does not materialize or is materialized unsuccessfully, then all kinds of hang-ups spring up in their psyche, or, to put it in transurfing terms, they form negative slides. It is fair to say that to a varying extent, sex issues concern, if not everybody, then a vast majority of people. And quite a few people have sex-related hang-ups. Pendulums play a significant role here. They try to convince you, by any means possible, that you are not perfect and that you've got problems. And you really start believing that you've got problems. You can't even imagine how many people there are out there who share this belief. If you are thinking that there are issues in your sex life while everyone else's sex life is fantastic, you are really mistaken. It's an illusion craftily created by pendulums with the help of the mass media. Haven't you noticed that wherever the topic of sex is touched upon, you are shown people who are apparently doing just great? Well, if you had a full stadium and removed everyone who had sex issues, then you could count on the fingers of one hand the number of people who would be left. Try imagining yourself in the center of a huge full stadium which has suddenly got empty, and you're looking around trying to find the remaining normal people. That's the kind of proportions we're talking about here. Even if your friends are not exaggerating when they brag about their success, you can be sure that they too have their own problems, which they carefully hide not only from those around them, but also from themselves. Let's not bring up Freud. He could hardly imagine the sheer scale of sexomania in our times. I'd just like you to ask yourself a question. Why are there so many problems surrounding such a simple function, which has been made perfectly efficient by nature? The answer to this question lies on a completely unexpected plane, partly related to the phenomena such as flash mobs. Let me repeat that. The answer to this question lies on a completely unexpected plane, partly related to the phenomena such as flash mobs. If you do not know what these are, I'll explain. Imagine a crowded street or square on a sunny day. Everything is going on just as usual, and then suddenly, just like that, a couple of dozen or 100 people take out umbrellas, open them, and start behaving as if it was raining. Normal passer-bys stand with their mouths wide open, while the rain people are having a blast. Such an impressive event is very easy to set up. do not even know each other, a group of people who do not even know each other use the internet to agree that at a specific time, in a specific place, once given a sign, they will perform an odd act. What is actually happening during the event? As you know, when a group of people start thinking in the same direction, a pendulum is created. The flash mob group is thinking, "Look at us, we've got umbrellas." Other passerbys stand with their mouths open, perplexed. What's gotten into them? The uniform thought emission of the group creates a resonance, the energy of which is in turn consumed by a pendulum. A flash pendulum is the most short-lived of all. It blazes up and goes out, and for that reason it does not cause anyone any harm. This harmless example shows us how longer-lived and more destructive pendulums are created and how they operate. What does it take to make people emit energy in one direction? You need to determine mental and behavioral stereotypes. Set a rule. It is, of course, not pendulums that create the rules, but people themselves. Pendulums are unable to materialize a conscious intention. They spring up spontaneously, but it is a conscious rule that brings them into existence. The rule of the pendulum is the most terrible and harmful of all things that mankind has come up with. Let me repeat that. The rule of the pendulum is the most terrible and harmful of all things that mankind has come up with. And this is how it goes. Do as I do. At the end of the day, all mental and behavioral stereotypes come down to following the pendulum rule. Spend some time observing and you'll notice that this rule has an effect more often than not. Of course, it does not always cause harm. For example, a wave of fans on a stadium gives rise to a flash pendulum, and it too is fed by resonance energy, although nobody suffers from it. In a concert hall, a pendulum consumes the energy of the audience at full power. This is also completely harmless, but notice how performers sometimes behave on stage. They try their best to stir up the audience by using the pendulum rule. Higher, put your hands higher in the air, and now everybody together. The audience obediently claps their hands, and this energy, which is tiny for one person, develops into a resonance that creates an invisible monster suspended above the hall. If the pendulum did not consume this energy, the performer on stage would literally fly up into the air. But the performer gets pretty crumbs. Everything else is snatched up by the pendulum. The monster lives as long as people obey the rule, do as I do. And so what? It's not like anything bad happened. True, flash pendulums are harmless, but what has it got to do with sex? You'll never guess. We started talking about sex, but switched to the topic of flash mobs. So what have the two got in common? You probably think it's something to do with energy. That's true. A flash pendulum is created during sex and consumes the resonance energy in the process. Since ancient times, people suspected or perhaps even knew about the presence of a certain entity hovering above the act. This entity, which within the model of transurfing we call a flash pendulum, is usually associated among various peoples with emotionally tinged symbols. For example, the amusement of Satan. Some followers of the occult are firmly convinced that energy is released during sex, attracting various representatives of the ethereal world who immediately flock together and initiate their devilish orgy. Regardless of what people say, you shouldn't worry too much about it, because a flash pendulum cannot do you harm. It simply feeds on the energy you would have wasted anyway, and that's all. But that is not the point I am making here. The important thing that connects sex in its modern form with a pendulum is the pendulum rule, Do as I do. With the development of digital means of mass media, the pendulum rule has achieved undivided domination. The human psyche is constantly subject to an invisible but rather efficient processing with the implanting of behavioral and mental stereotypes. I'm hesitant to use the word zombifying in this case, but basically that is where everything is headed. The modern information and entertainment industry is based on one simple principle. Watch the others, the ones who've become successful, and follow them. Follow their example. All that these industries are trying to demonstrate to you is the benchmark of success. You know this perfectly well, but perhaps you didn't stop to think about the enormity of the impact of this propaganda, which is sometimes obvious, but which more often acts in a subtle way, creating an impact, little by little. This is partially true for everything that is somehow related to sexual relations. In this case, the stereotypes of how it should be are firmly settled. All kinds of printed and video matter on the subject show relations which, we are led to believe, satisfy common standards. Don't think I'm talking about some conspiracy or intentional propaganda. In reality, nobody has it as their goal to embed stereotypes in people's heads. Everything happens of its own accord. The fact of the matter is that there is always doubt in our mind. Am I doing the right thing? There is always a need for comparison because success is relative. Therefore, when someone witnesses someone else's success, he is naturally inclined to see it as a benchmark for himself. Sexual relations, and sex in particular, mainly take place in an intimate and closed circle. Subsequently, the need to confirm that we're doing okay goes up. And if you do not have, or not to mention have never had a partner, then you feverishly start looking for a benchmark. And the mass media, of course, satisfy this human need, offering all kinds of models for a wide audience. That is how commonly accepted stereotypes are shaped. How you should do it, what kind of image you should have, and all of that. For instance, he is a cool macho type. She is a hot, sexy lady. Look at them, do as they do. And if you do not fit these standards, then there is something wrong with you. The sheer vastness of the destructiveness of this rule is difficult to imagine. You probably think I am unduly exaggerating the importance of the problem when I say that the pendulum rule is the most terrible and harmful rule of all things invented by mankind. Not at all. I am being rather modest in my descriptions. The number of unsuccessful couples is huge. The number of could have been happy families is perhaps even greater. When it comes down to it, the main reason for breakup is sexual dissatisfaction. Everything else is either a consequence brought about by the dissatisfaction or excuses made by people who do not want to admit to each other the nature of the real cause. Dissatisfaction occurs as a result of two people following the pendulum rule. They know that in accordance to the standards, one should do it this way and that way. The pendulum rule reads, do as I do, and that means change yourself, betray yourself. Let me repeat that. The pendulum rule reads, do as I do, and that means change yourself, betray yourself. So people try to adjust to the established standards, but get emotional discomfort and dissatisfaction as a result. The mistake made by anyone who has any kind of sexual problems is that he or she is playing a role. It's all very simple. You choose out of many models the one that suits you the most and choose another one for your partner. Then you take on the role and start playing it, while pinning a projection that corresponds to your expectations onto your partner. However, interestingly, you play this role in a distanced manner, like a playing spectator, because you are constantly comparing yourself and your partner to the model to check whether you're doing everything right. As a result, everything goes pear-shaped because the nature of sex is such that it requires relaxation, liberation, and devotion. Sex is the only case where you need to immerse yourself in the game and do so without playing any roles. Normal and natural sex is a game with rules established by you, with no looking back at how others are doing it and how it is allegedly supposed to be. Let me repeat that. Normal and natural sex is a game with rules established by you, with no looking back at how others are doing it and how it is allegedly supposed to be. In addition, things become very confusing when two different concepts, love and sex, become wrongly mixed up. Sometimes the pure sanctimonious use of the expression "let's make love" makes you sick. Wouldn't it be easier to call things by their names? Sex is not love, and love is not sex. But aren't these things compatible? They are, but once again, love is not sex, and sex is not love. Let me repeat that. Love is not sex, and sex is not love. These things can be both combined and separated, but the pendulum rule prevents you from doing it naturally. I won't be mistaken if I say that any failure in a sexual context has to do with the fact that people, while following the pendulum rule, are trying to artificially combine love and sex. As a result, you get a senseless hybrid. In truth, if you were to forget about rules and standards, it would all be very simple. Imagine a scale with the 0 mark in the middle, with affection to the left and aggression to the right. So if the arrow shifts to the left, it is love. If to the right, it is sex. You may not like the idea, but sex, no matter how you view it, is more about aggression than it is about affection. But many people become ashamed or afraid when they feel these diabolical instincts come to life within them. They think it is perverted. In reality, two normal people meet and behave completely normal at first, but then they get a predatory twinkle in their eyes and they start doing things that are completely out of line. Out of line of what? And this is where the pendulum rule comes in. On the one hand, they are generally accepted lines of decency, the crossing of which is not always appropriate. On the other hand, while you're within these lines, getting pleasure from sex is impossible. But people want both. And so in order to adjust to the standards, people start playing their roles. Afraid to awaken animal instincts, they water down sex with established rituals which they think are necessary. This in turn brings about a sort of enslavement. You ought to let go of the reins, but the pendulum rule does not allow you to. And the other way round, if the arrow moves far in the direction of aggression, there is immediately a need for confirmation. Do you love me? So there are two playing spectators always present on stage. Just like puppets, they are hanging on the thread of control to which they have attached themselves. What are they doing? They are trying with all their might to pull the arrow from one side to another and then back again. Let me repeat that. They are trying with all their might to pull the arrow from one side to another and then back again, when all they need to do is to spit upon the pendulum rule and let go of the arrow. Let it move freely in correlations with feelings of the soul and not ideas of the mind. Someone may object and say that if we carry on like this, we'll sink to the animal level. But in this case, it is the pendulum rule at work. Who sets the limits where humanness ends and the animal instinct level starts? It's not even about limits, but about the fact that you should set the rules for yourself and not follow those of others. You are a person, and for that reason, you've got the right to your own criteria of humanity and decency. I hope you understand that I am writing all this for people who have problems with sex, and in particular for those who are in love. All you need to do in order to eliminate the problem is to let go of the arrow just as consciously as you consciously keep control over following the pendulum rule. There is a group of people who do not experience any difficulties in sex. In truth, many problems disappear if you start calling things by their real names, if you do not mix different concepts together, if you are consciously aware of what you want to get, and most importantly, if you are honest in telling your partner about it. Life will immediately become easier if you are open. You can be sure that your partner too has plenty of secret desires. At the same time, there may be situations where one partner wants something the other partner finds unacceptable. What do you do in that case? First, you should always remember the first principle of Frailing. Give up the intention to get, replace it with the intention to give, and you will get what you gave up. Let me repeat that. Give up the intention to get, replace it with the intention to give, and you will get what you gave up. This excellent principle works without a hitch, and sometimes you won't even understand the precise mechanism behind it. Second, you still need to completely reject the pendulum rule and replace it with the rule of transurfing. And the rule reads, let yourself be you and let a different person be different. Let me repeat that. The Transurfing rule reads, let yourself be you and let a different person be different. As you understand, in order to get sexual satisfaction, you have to feel at ease and uninhibited. You cannot feel at ease if you have excess potentials in the shape of hang-ups and complexes, for example, an inferiority complex. No matter how much you try to relax, equilibrium forces won't let you. But the lion's share of tension arises not so much as a consequence of excess potentials as such, but more as a result of dependent relationships. People's internal intention is most often directed at getting and not at giving. On top of that, a projection that corresponds to the expectations associated within the given role is usually pinned on the partner. People really don't want other people to be different. Dependent relationships, as you know, cause polarization, which summons the wind of equilibrium forces, which in the end ruins everything. The rule of transurfing immediately removes the polarization created by dependent relationships. Therefore, even if you cannot manage to get rid of your hang-ups, it's enough to follow the rule of transurfing, and the tension will immediately and noticeably subside. Let yourself be you means to accept yourself with all your imperfection. Let me repeat that. Let yourself be you means to accept yourself with all your imperfection. Let a different person be different means to take off him or her the projections of your expectations. Let me repeat that. Let a different person be different means to take off him or her the projections of your expectations. As a result, the situation where one wants something another finds unacceptable will resolve itself in the most incomprehensible way. I repeat, all you need is to reject the pendulum rule. Do as I do. Replace it with the rule of transurfing. Let yourself be you, let a different person be different. And direct your attention in accordance with the first principle of Frailing. Let me repeat that. All you need to do is reject the pendulum rule, replace it with the rule of transurfing, and direct your attention in accordance with the first principle of Frailing. If you do it together with your partner, you won't have any more problems. Related discussions on the subject, why it works, we will leave to the psychologist. It just works, and that's it. But generally speaking, why does a pendulum need a rule? In the case of flash pendulums, it's obvious. They feed on resonance energy, so the synchronism of actions is essential to them. But what about all the other long-lived pendulums, which do not need their adherents to act as one? What keeps them up? First and foremost, the pendulum rule sets the norms for behavior and the way you think. That is, it sets the standards for what is normal. People do not understand that they are being offered an ersatz, a surrogate of success. Someone else's success cannot serve as an example or a role model. Only those who are brave enough to break the rule and follow their own path achieve true success. If you follow in someone else's footsteps, you are forever bound to chase the setting sun. Let me repeat that. If you follow in someone else's footsteps, you are forever bound to chase the setting sun. Success standards are a mirage, but people do not know or do not wish to know that the pendulum rule keeps them in the cobweb of illusion. Illusion is often sweeter, more comfortable and comprehensible than the unknown reality. When a person comes face to face with the fact that he does not fit the established standards, he experiences emotional discomfort. He is oppressed by the fear that he is going to be defeated. He senses his inferiority and feels all alone in this hostile world. What can such a person do? One option is rejection. He can surround himself with a wall of rejection aimed at the unattainable models of success. Or he can continue his chase after a model. By following the pendulum rule, he tries to change himself and chases his soul into the case of conditionality. That brings nothing but dissatisfaction, as a result of which he has to change himself once again. And so, whenever you hark after a model, you emit the energy of dissatisfaction and disappointment. Let me repeat that. And so, whenever you hark after a model, you emit the energy of dissatisfaction and disappointment. It cannot be any other way. In exactly the same way, a little donkey goes round and round after a carrot hanging on a string. That is the energy the destructive pendulums feed off. The same pendulums that offer you the models of someone else's success. The wall of aversion, in its turn, requires at least the same amount of energy. It's quite difficult to keep a defense field around you when everywhere you go, rules are being embedded in you, rules that you are unable to follow. But there is a way out of this labyrinth. It involves rejecting the pendulum rule and going your own way. Let me repeat that. There is a way out of this labyrinth. It involves rejecting the pendulum rule and going your own way. If you do this, you will experience an incredible quality, which will literally take your breath away. This quality is inner freedom. And there are people out there who are just like that. Take, for example, the following letter from a woman who is standing a few steps away from this freedom. I am almost 30 years old, and I have never had a man. Sexologists say this is a serious abnormality, but I cannot understand why. I've always believed that it doesn't say anywhere that you absolutely have to sleep with somebody before 25, and that virginity is a reason for moral execution. I am attractive, and I've had more than enough opportunities to have sex, but I do not want to. The problem is not on a physical level. That's all fine. I just haven't met a man I would like to go to bed with. But lately I catch myself feeling that it's weighing upon me more and more, because everyone is indulging in carnal love, and I'm not. That is the way things are, but I'm not following the rule. I've never been a slave to social stereotypes. but it looks like this particular aspect of them is starting to annoy me. Sometimes I simply feel like a moral freak. However, the fact that I'm alone does not affect my self-esteem at all. I consciously do not want to engage in intimate relations without that special pull towards a person. Is my case really a deviation? A disruption of some kind? I said a few steps away because the fear of not being like everyone else is nonetheless present in this woman. Still, her inner power and independence are obvious, and that is already something. And there is, of course, nothing anomalous about this case. Just don't be afraid of being not like everyone else. Instead, enjoy it. Let me repeat that. Don't be afraid of being not like everyone else. Instead, enjoy it. Then again, you shouldn't take it too far. Perhaps it would be worthwhile lowering your standards and being more easygoing. Judging by the information that comes pouring down on us from all over the place, one might think that all people do is have sex. Actually, this is just an illusion. It is far from the case that everybody is leading an active lifestyle in this sense. Most of us don't even have a partner. But the dread of being alone and the fear of being different from everyone else makes one believe in the illusion. Take, for instance, Paris, with its air of freedom and ease. It has earned the reputation of the city of lonely hearts. Every day, from early morning, people rush out onto the streets and mingle in the numerous cafes. Why do they do this? After all, surely you could have your coffee at home. They do it because loneliness is chasing them out of their house. It may seem to some that pendulums are deliberately enslaving human society with their rule. Indeed, they are enslaving people. But pendulums are not the ones to set the rule. They exist because of it. The rule creates a pendulum. And then this pendulum starts doing its dark deed. The main feature of a pendulum that makes it so destructive is that it leads people far away from the path where they could find their true happiness. Let me repeat that. The main feature of a pendulum that makes it so destructive is that it leads people far away from the path where they could find their true happiness. Imagine a crowded street where everyone is busy with their own agendas. Suddenly, people in black appear on the street, forcing everyone into a line and making them march. One or two people make an attempt to get out of the line, but they are immediately and crudely brought back into line. Stop! Where are you going? Get back in line! A film like Matrix was not made by coincidence. Science fiction has a tendency to eventually turn into reality. And this tendency is accelerating. If you'll notice, the gap between science fiction and real materialization is getting narrower and narrower. Of course, people are not sitting in containers with suction cups attached to their bodies, but the analogy is drawn really close. Everyone thinks that formation is a kind of reality. In truth, the need to be in a formation is an illusion. True reality is when you can get out of the formation and go your own way. Let me repeat that. True reality is when you can get out of the formation and go your own way. But becoming aware of it is not too easy. People are so used to living through their illusions that they need a good shake, or as in Carlos Castaneda's books, to shift the assemblage point so that they can see what is reality and what is illusion. Handicapped people, for example, are among those people who have no choice. They are forced to either suffer from their deficiency or to disregard the pendulum rule. When someone realizes that he has nothing more to lose, he refuses to chase the model anymore and starts living for his pleasure. Handicapped sportsmen playing basketball in their wheelchairs are immeasurably happier than healthy teenagers mimicking Michael Jordan. The latter look less natural than the handicapped individuals because they are walking in formation, and not a single one of them will become the new Michael Jordan until he figures out that he needs to step out of the line. Those who break the pendulum rule either become leaders or renegades. Some make their way to stardom, others become social outcasts. The difference between the two is that the first group of people are convinced that they have the full right to break the pendulum rule, while the others have doubts. Stars are born on their own, but pendulums are the ones to light them. Those individuals who step out of the formation create a new model of success. Pendulums cannot stand individuality. They see a rising star, and there's nothing else they can do but to make it their favorite. And so a new rule is established, at which point the formation turns around and starts marching after the new star. Do you understand what is going on here? But in order to get out of the formation, you need to know how to do it. If you start fighting the people in black, you will suffer defeat. In the battle with pendulums, you will be brought down forever. The whole secret is that you need to get out of formation without a struggle. Let me repeat that. The whole secret is that you need to get out of formation without a struggle. You can simply step out and, with a calm smile on your face, wave goodbye to the people in black, and then go on your own way. They will bend over backwards to get you back into line, but they won't be able to do anything about it if you won't fight with them. But in order to understand this simple truth, you have to thoroughly re-examine your worldview. There are many things in our world that are upside down. Transurfing in this sense puts everything back in place and helps reject the pendulum rule. However, many may not even accept the idea that they are squeezed into a matrix. Those who prefer to stay asleep do not need transurfing. We all get what we choose. Illusion is also a choice, and anyone who prefers it has the right to it. I am not forcing anything on anybody and do not intend to prove my ideas. You can test everything for yourself. I am just walking by saying, hey, there is this thing called reality transurfing. Oh, really? Yep, I'm headed there. You can do as you want. That's all. End segment.